meet some of the new relatives.
Oh, it says we're live on Facebook now.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Native Wellness Institute's 60th week of Power Hour, to bring you proactive, positive wellness and healing. Today is Friday, yay! We have a real special guest. Jillene and I we're just excited. We wanted to have a dialogue with you about the sobriety and the healing movement. So we welcome you to the Native Wellness Institute's Power Hour. We'll be with you for the next 60 minutes and some dialogue. So welcome. And so Nistudi Daniko Makoyo Sakoi is my second Blackfoot name. And my English name is Theda NewBreast, and I'm part of the NWI team. Board member. And so I'd like to have our executive director, Jillene, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Theda. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jillene Joseph. My Indian name is Donate, which means small woman. And my people are the Aani from Fort Belknap, Montana, also known as Grovant. And I'm the executive director of the Native Wellness Institute, and I'm super happy to be here. I have a little bit of a foggy brain, and we had a foggy start with our technology, so thanks for your patience. And I'm super, super happy to welcome one of my mentors and colleagues and friends and heroes that gets to be with us today. And I'd like to welcome Dr. John Spence. So John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jillene and Theda. John Spence, I'm Grovant and Sioux from Fort Belknap, Montana originally. And I just appreciate these two ladies here. They talk about positive, man. This Jillene and Theda, they're really good models for everybody in Indian country. So I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. You know, we're so excited because, you know, during this time of healing, you know, these last 60 weeks, many people have jotted down their story, and some have done it in many forms, book form, some have done it in podcasts, and we're really fortunate to have John, who I first became aware when I was first getting sober in the 80s, the early 80s, 1980s. And John was one of the Montana gurus, I would say, with Jack Pipe, Bonnie Pipe, Gordon Belcourt. I mean, you guys were just like, you didn't know how inspiring you were, and to see our Native men stand up for sobriety and stand up for keeping women sacred and stand up for helping children. So John wrote a book. I mean, it was like, you know, we all say we're going to write a book, but John wrote it, you know, and that's just so awesome, you know, to sit down and to reflect, to sit down and look at all the chapters of our lives and look at how we evolved. I know Jillene and I are best friends with John's older brother, Avis Archambault. You know, we've always had her as part of our team. And so maybe we could just start off, John. Introduce yourself and tell us why you wrote this book.
Okay, again, John Spence, Grovant from Fort Belknap, Montana. Well, I tell you, like Theda says, I think it's really important in this healing time that we be upfront about, you know, how we got here and what we've done to, you know, get out. Even for those of us who, you know, became dependent on alcohol, particularly, which is not part of our culture, you know, which is, to me, it's the symbol. It's a symptom, big, huge symptom of generational oppression that, you know, NWI talks a lot about. Jillene is. I really credit Jillene for getting that term out there, you know, and dealing with trauma, like, you know, lately trauma informed, for example, the importance of talking about that, getting some knowledge about that, and getting out front about what happened. And so, like for me, I think it's just important that, I say it at some time, my own story. And that's what's been great about getting involved with the sobriety movement that for me started, well, actually in Portland, way back in the 70s when I got involved, kind of got conned. I got tricked into getting on this board, the NARA, Native American Rehabilitation Association. So in fact, even in those days, this was 1970 actually, when NARA started. And the director, a guy named Steve Askinette, he's a Menominee from Wisconsin or Minnesota, I forget. But anyway, I was still trying to be a social drinker, a bit like you, Theda. Like, in our younger days, like Jesus, it's kind of like, geez, we had this kind of, we thought, well, that's what Indians do, right? I mean, our relatives, our parents, folks we grew up with, particularly on the reservation, where, these economic realities were pretty bleak. And the racism was, hey, it was bad. And when I was a kid growing up in the 1940s and 50s, it wasn't cool to be Indian. Come on, let's just be upfront about that. And that's, again, due to the generations of oppression to our people. So as a symptom to deal with that pain, a lot of our parents, our family members turned to alcohol, again, to deal with that pain. So I experienced that a lot as a child. And you earlier mentioned, Theda, the Nanakoa, Native American Children of Alcoholics, starting in the early 80s, and how that really was important to help bring that out. That as children like me and yourself, growing up surrounded with our parents and alcohol and our relatives drinking, huge drinking environment, that affected us. And it affected us as children, and it affected us as young adults. And for some of our peers, our age or younger too, it was a hard thing to get out of. You kind of just, that's how you dealt with it. So for myself, what I learned in sobriety and recovery is that you got to tell your story. The stories are what's healing. And so this is, I fit so good into our culture. I was talking about it, oral histories. That means a lot to us. It's how we keep our traditions going, not things written down. So as growing up with these stories, I almost had that from my grandmother and my uncle, but no, it was mostly my grandmother telling us kids a story. You mentioned my older sister, Avis Archambault. Sam Archambault from Standing Rock was our grandpa. So that's where the Lakota Sioux part of us comes in. But we were raised at Fort Belknap. Our mother died at an early age. I was 3 when that happened, and I never knew my biological father. Never did meet him. So, we grew up with these stories, and when I finally decided to get honest about my own dependency on alcohol, what I naturally turned to at that time was the AA program in Montana that had started earlier by, you mentioned Jack and Jim Pipe. And I want to also mention he's my mentor, sponsor, Ozzy, from your reservation, the Blackfeet. And Ozzy, I really want to credit a lot for getting the sobriety movement going in Montana. Ozzy and his wife, Jill, who's from Fort Belknap, Jill Plumage, they started a meeting in Billings. In fact, when I got sober, they had already got this meeting going. And I have to laugh now myself. It was kind of so stupid about nothing. And it was called the How Group, HOW. And it was an Indian A group. And again, this is when I quit drinking in 1982. But they had started a year or two earlier in Billings. So it's a big Indian population in Billings, from all the 7 reservations of Montana. All kinds of tribes are there at Billings, close to the Crow Reservation and Northern Cheyenne. So Ozzy and Jill were, I don't know if they were both working at the Indian Center there at the time, but they got this little group going. It's called How. And, I thought, oh, it's an Indian group. And it was like how, like how, like this. But, it stood for HOW, stood for honesty, openness, and willingness. Which is a big slogan thing in AA. So that's how, I really became introduced to other Indians in sobriety a lot. Of course, earlier in Portland with NARA starting, I was real aware of that. I was on their board and stuff, and trying to hide my own drinking behind, Indian rodeo, and I played rugby and a crazy sport for a lot of years. So drinking was attached to a lot of that, of both, Indian rodeo and the rugby. And so those were drinking eras for me. Those helped hide my own dependence on alcohol, my need to be, in social situations, dealing with that anxiety, that social anxiety. And then also as an introvert, an extreme introvert. In fact, that's where my Indian name comes from, Crazy Wolf. There's something wrong with a wolf that is off by themselves. There's something different or crazy about them, because wolves are a tight family unit, right? And so this uncle started calling me that early on. I don't remember what age, but it stuck. And that's my personality. That's just how I am. So again, alcohol was the thing that helped draw me out, helped make me feel comfortable around other folks. So the importance of storytelling, both in our culture and in how we sober up in AA. We share our stories. So sometimes we call those drunkalogs. A certain person's drunkalog can be real, meandering or long or maybe even boring, but others can be just amazing. And I learned, to listen to a lot of these old timers. When you mentioned them again, the Pike brothers from Fort Peck and Ozzy from Browning, particularly those men. And again, these are Indian men. For me, that is important. Growing up without a father, and my stepfather was never around, and he didn't care about me, and he's no alcoholic, So I had also a lot of role models as uncles for role models, but they again, they were affected by that drinking. A lot of them were World War II veterans. In fact, most of the men from my reservation were from that generation. They're World War II veterans, and actually for our parents in that age, my mother, for example, had gone off to Seattle to work in the defense industry, like Rosie the Riveter. And I imagine a lot of your parents, Theda, and relatives did the same thing. And Jillene's, they came out during World War II. So during that World War II era was the first time that a lot of Indian folks came to the cities from the reservation, serving the military or defense industries. And then, of course, a lot of people stayed there because, work was available. Where work on the reservation is pretty scarce. Super high unemployment, which is still going on. We still have the highest poverty rate per capita of any other ethnic group. But then, of course, people also went out during relocation beginning in the late 40s, but 50s especially. I think the funding for relocation actually didn't start till the early 40s, but my uncle, we went out early, and partly to Seattle. We moved into a a housing project. And again, the projects in the cities, that's where a lot of our Indian people wound up because of low income. We were in poverty. We were on welfare, actually. Back on the reservation, we didn't have to be. I mean, everybody was poor. You managed to make a living somehow. But in the city, you can't do that. There's sustainability, for yourself, your family. We were on welfare because my uncle didn't earn enough at Boeing to take care of all of us. And it's a thing. It's another thing you're ashamed of. Again, you've got the racism impacting you as Indian people because it wasn't cool to be an Indian in the 40s and 50s. Not like it is now. Geez, people find out you're native or part native. It's you're kind of this, spiritual person, or they think that of this. It's a nice stereotype now, but God, our stereotype in the 40s and 50s, well, we're all drunk or dumb or something, or lazy or dirty or something. In fact, there was a book called Nobody Loves a Drunken Indian. I remember in the late 67 it came out. There was a movie in 1970, which didn't have Indian actors. Anthony Quinn was the main guy, this guy named Flap, and that was the name of the movie. So that was, a lot of those movies were terrible, are perpetuating us as either, the forgotten Indian, as tragedy, or just plain drunk, uneducated, all that crap, the negative image that a lot of us grew up with. So for myself, it was the poverty, the discrimination about being poor and on welfare, and you add Indian when it wasn't cool, that contributed to a negative self-image for a long time. But sobriety and recovery, that's a part of it, regaining that, regaining the pride. So to me, having cultural renewal that's been happening for us, I credit in the book the Fish Wars, for example, of the 50s and 60s out of Puget Sound, and then Alcatraz in '69 when you were down there, Theda.
Yeah.
And those things to me, Alcatraz and the fishing wars, the Fishians also, to me that really got us going in terms of renewed pride, and then taking action. Why don't I just stop there and let you guys ask questions, or if anybody else has.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure. I have some questions, and if anybody else has questions for John, you can put them in the chat as well. But I wanted to hold up his book. This is his book, Crazy Wolf, a half-breed story, it says. And I was just looking at the table of contents. Chapter 2 is actually called Nobody Loves a Drunken Indian. So there's just some awesome. I read this several months ago, and in one sitting, I just sat down and read the whole thing. I couldn't stop, and it was just awesome. And one of the things that I loved about it was, just how you just painted this picture and told all these stories of how trauma really impacted your life, right? And just different stages of your life of how you wrote that. And then I loved how at the end you started just, focusing on that healing part, right? Focusing on the cultural strengths and, these are some of the solutions and, all of that. But first I wanted to just ask a couple of things of what motivated you to write this, and what continued to motivate you as you were writing chapter by chapter?
Okay, it's just, again, it's the basic idea of storytelling as important in our culture, and telling one story as important in healing. And particularly, if, like me, you became dependent on alcohol. So the combination of AA with the storytelling and our culture with the importance of storytelling, that's what got to me. And it was just the right time. I mean, God, just fortunately, after the car wrecks I survived, the broken relationships due to my alcoholism, my selfishness, my immaturity related to that, That's what we carry, and the guilt, the things that we carry around with that. And then getting over, well, I had, with the renewal of Indian cultural pride, like I say, beginning in the 60s, particularly, and then the 70s, busting out there, that just all of that helped me in my healing. And I've seen it in others. I mean, I've seen miracles in the program, we call it. I've seen miracles. It happened also with the idea of men, Indian men. Again, me growing up without a father and not having really a lot of healthy role models as Indian men. When I ran into folks like, oh, I forgot to mention one guy, Bert Eater from Fort Peck. I'd never seen, I described that in the book. I'd never seen a guy like Bert Eater. There's this big, tall, rugged looking Indian, a guy you wouldn't want to ever take on a bar fight. This guy, was mean looking and tough and big, and he's he's Lakota from Fort Peck. And also, he didn't have a suit and tie like all these other bigwigs. He was on the American Indian Commission of the National Institute, NIAAA anyway, in Washington. He was just a forerunner. And Ozzy was on there also. To get NARA funded, Bert walked into this meeting in Portland with all these big these feds and state people, and he just took over. He just commanded the room. Like I said, I'd never seen an Indian man like this. This was 1971, excuse me, because we got funded in 72 because of him. He just said, I want you guys to help those two Indian boys over there help write a grant. That was Al Smith and me, Al Smith from Klamath. And we just got, we were in awe. And we got the grant funded in no time because of Bert just ordering these guys to do it. And also, like I said, he didn't walk in there like these other guys with suits and ties. He had a short sleeve shirt, a bolo tie, and some Western cut pants and cowboy boots, and a big cigar. He had a big cigar. And you look, okay, the guys like the Pike brothers, Jim and Jack, were also from Fort Peck. So these big, tall Indians, these Sioux guys, just ordering people around, And then Ozzy, as tough as Ozzy was, So, well, I don't know if I answered it, but it's the storytelling, it's like,
Yeah.
That's me growing up as well as an AA there.
Yeah, awesome. And I know you had shared about, wanting to leave something for your grandchildren too, right? Yes. Wanting to leave these stories for your grandchildren. I think that's beautiful. Good. Did you have a question for him? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Theda, did you have a question?
Yes, I was just making sure. John, I was just smiling and reminiscing. For us women, gosh, in the 1970s, I think it was like late, like 1979, we saw Harold Belmont light a smudge at a conference. It was like there was Native men getting up and apologizing to women. There was Native men saying, give me a chance to be your father. There was Native men saying, give me a chance to be a man, and, I can remember Ozzy, and I just remember, seeing all of you, like, you were like my heroes. I mean, I felt like so insignificant, I was just this little, teary-eyed social worker that was going to save the world. You know how we are. But when I seen, men like yourself come into the room, and I seen men like yourself apologize to women, and I seen men like yourself talk about, the remorse, to talk about the anger, and to talk about alternatives to anger, it just gave me such hope, and of course, Ozzy was always there. Ozzy is my biological uncle, but he just was always there. But I just remember Jack Pipe, and I remember seeing you and just seeing several of the men, like it's like you took charge. And so maybe you could, if you could just talk about it, because it's important for Jillene and I are women, and we've been maneuvering this healing work, especially during this pandemic, 60 weeks. Could you share with us, like in some nutshells or some nuggets of what Native men have to walk through to help them be a better person, a better man?
Wow, that's really good. That's really good. But first, let me go back a second to what Jillene said. Yes, the big motivation for the book was to leave something for my grandchildren. They've grown up in the city. My sons, two sons, and my daughter's 3 little kids. Of course, after sobering up and getting well, they trust me. My kids trust me. I babysit for these kids sometimes, so that was just number one, to leave, because they don't know who this crazy, crazy grandpa, this crazy Indian grandpa of theirs is. So I wanted to leave that record. Okay, so the men. Oh wow, good question. And I had to have others. I had to have, since I didn't have a father, and I loved my uncles, but man, you couldn't rely. You couldn't rely. How many of us my age, or even younger, somebody was going to take you fishing, somebody's going to take you hunting, and they didn't show up, or they're late, they're drinking, or they're just unreliable. For Indian men to be helpful, to be healthy, we've got to be reliable. And that's why, in sobriety, I'm going to break my neck to get somewhere that I said I'd be, or to do what I said I was going to do. And if I can't make it, I'm going to apologize right away. In AA, we say make amends. Huge, big thing. Apologize. And not have this get over this macho stuff. Cowboys don't cry. Well, you better learn to cry. Men out there, you better learn to cry for healing. And I know why you don't a lot. There's this, I don't know, this ethos of the strong stoic Indian man, a tough cowboy. And, we grew up this way. Cowboys don't cry. Men my age, you went in the service, you went in because you were drafted, or that's just what Indian men did. There was high unemployment on the reservation. Military is what you do, one of the things you do, and almost like a rite of passage. And then the boarding school. So many of my parents both were in boarding school, my 2 biological parents, my grandmother, all my uncles, everybody went to boarding school. And so for men, the boarding school mentality, in the old days wasn't healthy. It was cruel. You weren't allowed to, you had to be tough to survive. And then the military for men, a lot more women now, that's a good thing. But for men, you got to be tough. You can't be crying around. And so we just have to, for our healing, we have got to get over that. We've got to talk to another man. Well, that's AA strong about your sponsor has to be the same gender, right? So like Ozzy was my main guy. And then I have some relatives at Fort Belknap who were sober before me. The King brothers, there's a bunch of King family. They're amazing guys. 2 of them particularly were sober before me, Harvey and Richard, and just great family, great super family. So that we've got to now become the role models to the younger folks. And I am hopeful. I'm totally optimistic that that we're going to be better. I've seen it myself. I remember the 40s and 50s, what life was like for Indian people versus what it can be now and what it is now. For example, right here in Portland area where I'm living, there's some young Indian guys who are just amazing. Thank God they don't have to go through some of the stuff that guys my generation did, or even my parents' generation. So, we just kind of being in men, we got to get over that macho stuff and just be more honest and express our feelings. And these healing ceremonies, that's what we do. These, you go to sweat lodge. What could be more emotionally, psychologically healthy than going to sweat lodge for a man? A men's sweat lodge. This is where it all comes out, or it has to come out. Or the other ceremonies we have that, and of course, I don't, none of us really want to talk a lot about our ceremonies to protect the sacredness of that. And like these confidentiality in any healing relationship. Okay, social workers or psychologists, that you've got to honor confidentiality to develop a relationship of trust. Well, oh, there you go. I mean, like a lot of us didn't grow up with trust.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's a good place just to think about that trust. Before we, when Jillene and I were kind of messaging each other before today, I was thinking about Joe Ironman over on the Fort Belknap Reservation and his alliance with Buster Yellow Kidney. And just over, I don't know, the last, 6 decades of them really helping Indian men with their spiritual side. And then, you mentioning all the names that you're mentioning, with Ozzy and, the King brothers, Tracy King. Yeah, Tracy King, yay. And just Richard King, and just I just remember, just as a young woman, I really needed to retrust the men. And that was like a big healing for me, was to retrust men. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, how does the Indian man earn his trust with women? How does the Indian man do that, John?
Boy, yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, we got to be sober, number one. I think I mentioned Dr. Eduardo Duran in my book. He and Don Coyas, another one, 2 men really important. Healing movement, cultural renewal around the country. Don Coyas starting White Bison a number of years ago. How White Bison teaches cultural renewal and has some great curricula, for folks. And then Eduardo Duran, what was huge that I remember so well, talking about spirituality and his own experiences, what he could share. That is, I mean, this is the real deal, and talking about alcohol as a spirit. That it's a spirit, that affects us in a negative way. And very powerful. That's why it is so strong that most of us can't quit on our own. We can't quit without help. And AA talks about a higher power. So developing a spiritual, whatever your spiritual belief is. So for Indian, all of us, I'm sorry, but the Christian missionaries did a number on us, saying we're sinful, that we could only be saved through the Bible, through Jesus Christ, who was probably a great man, but I doubt that he, was that angry about everything. Anyway, let's see. So we've got to first trust ourselves, learn to trust ourselves. And then in the relationship with women, it's got to be a different thing. We can't be this macho and this, live with that kind of a myth. We've got to be open and more honest. And okay, I was married twice before my wife, who passed away 6 years ago. We were both sober then. She was sober for 5 years. I was sober for 10 years when we met. So, we had learned to develop trust with each other. But first we had to heal up ourselves. So we had to get away from that alcohol spirit. You see what I'm saying? The first 2 times I was married, I was too darn young, and I was too consumed with my own alcoholism that that didn't work. So getting into a healthy relationship, this is what I love about Jillene's healthy relationships training. Oh, I gotta tell, I know a lady, I won't say her name. She went to 2 of Jillene's healthy relationship trainings with her husband. And right away had 2 more kids. Like, I like to tease her, when we're together about that. And she likes to, oh yeah, that Jillene, that healthy relationship. God, I don't know how specific I could be. Just, you got to heal yourself first before you can get into a healthy relationship, I guess, right? Maybe you can heal up together. Maybe a couple who comes in, like in an NAR program, a couple can come in together while they're still in recovery. Wow, that would be fantastic, if they could both do it together. But unfortunately, a lot of times, we hook up in a bar because it's easy.
Yeah. Theda, I know who you're talking about. Theda was at that training as well, that health relationship training. So in your book, so again, it's called Crazy Wolf. You have a picture of your grandmother in here. Like, yeah. I love this picture. What did she teach you? What did your grandmother teach you?
Oh boy, she was just so amazing. She grew up with things way worse than we did. My 2 older sisters, Marcia and Avis, and I. She grew up with things way tougher than we did. In fact, she ran away from the boarding school, the mission boarding school at Hayes, Montana, St. Paul's Mission. She ran away from the boarding school so many times they gave up on making her go back. And I'm kind of amazed that even that day, because they would force, they're pretty brutal. The government agents would force you to go back. So I wonder, how the heck did she do that? She was just a little kid, and this would be the early 1900s. So what I'm saying is that she had strength. She was a strong woman. And when Theda and you guys developed the Gona model, well, my sister Avis was in that too, I guess, and John Bird, from another Browning warrior, like Theda. When Gona started going around teaching in Indian country parenting, wellness, community wellness. But the 4th stage of life, you describe in there in the training, is elder, and the elder most important characteristic is generosity. So generosity of spirit, generosity of teaching, generosity of sharing what you have. My grandmother totally exhibited all that. She didn't go far in school, right? I don't know which year she finally, and they made people in that age quit school to help the family so much. And she was forced actually to marry quite young. But despite everything that happened to her, she had this strength and she had this generosity. I mean, you come to our house, first thing, you're gonna get fed. You need a place to stay, you can stay. I mean, that growing up, Avis and Marcia and I, we like to talk, you know, just wall-to-wall Indians all the time at our place in Harlem and at Hayes. And then when we moved to the city, even in the project, our relatives would come over from Montana. Well, wall-to-wall Indians all the time. You never get turned away. And even though we're poor, somehow we got enough to feed everybody. So this generosity of spirit and wisdom, never bragging, never calling attention to herself. Just amazing person. It just, you know, we owe our lives to her. We survived because of her. And her and my uncle, you know, like they used to take away kids for no darn reason, except you were poor and didn't have parents. So I mentioned in the book, and we were on welfare in that project, we'd hide from the caseworkers because, you know, we heard the caseworkers take you away. And it's so ironic, I mentioned it there, that my first professional job, I wound up being a caseworker. And so I've been a social worker for over 50 years now, some kind of, you know, casework, group counseling, and community organizing or something. But I've always Indianized it. I mean, like, I'm a half-breed Indian. That's the other thing about the, you know, the title of the book. I want to just own it. Both my parents are half, according to agency roles. And nowadays, geez, a lot of the younger people, especially, we haven't got themselves together, are, you know, I have this Indian authenticity test I mentioned in the book. It's like, oh, you aren't Indian enough because of something. You aren't a full blood, you don't speak your language. My grandmother spoke our language fluently, but because of what happened to her, she didn't teach us it. She didn't teach us the Grovant language. And my grandpa, who was there until I was 6 years old before he passed away, he knew Lakota, but he wouldn't speak Lakota. So years later, particularly my sister Avis, is pretty fluent Lakota. But she, you know, all the brainwashing and the abuse and everything, she didn't teach us that. And that was the generation that was made to feel ashamed of being Indian, ashamed of their culture that had to go underground, right? I mean, in fact, it's illegal. What year was it? 1978, the Indian Religious Freedom Act. Long, you know, that was a long time for us to have to do things underground. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned Joe Ironman. Speaking of that, the two elders when I got sober in 1982 at Fort Belknap, they were huge, impressive to me, were Joe Ironman of Grovant and Max White of Assiniboine, well, Dakota and Ananin. But by being sober, then I could go to their ceremonies and not have that guilt, not have the guilt of the alcohol spirit in me, or the guilt of knowing, well, I can do great when I'm around these sober guys, these older men, these cultural folks, but I don't have the strength later on I'm going to drink. When I quit drinking in 82, it was great, like a huge burdens off my back. I could hang out with Joe Ironman and Max White, and I could be invited to their ceremonies and not have that guilt. So again, that was huge. I'm glad you mentioned Joe Ironman. Okay, go ahead.
Wow, John. Wow, you know, thank you. You've just taken us through a wave of history. You know, you mentioned 1978 Indian Religious Freedom Act. It was Indian Child Welfare Act. A lot of liberation then. And so maybe you could, in your book, like, how did you decide, like, why did you choose the chapters for? What stuck out? Because we want everyone to read the book, you know, and then kind of compare it with your own healing journey, because we want you to write your own book too. Yeah. You know, it is like to tell your own story. So John, maybe if you could just kind of share with us, like, how did you choose the chapters and what were the themes of the chapters and why were they chosen?
Okay. Okay, number one, Jillene reminded me of it, was a record for my grandkids who don't know anything about me. So they've got to know the story. So I tried to do the chapters in in a chronological order mostly, but there was an overlap because there's different periods that sort of come together or at the same time. For example, in college was a huge drinking era. When I'm asked somewhere to, an AA group to tell my story, they ask a speaker sometimes tell your story. I talk about 5 drinking eras. College was the first one. There were only 5 Indians on campus when I went to college in 1959, my freshman year. Again, Tilly Walker, this amazing lady, ran a scholarship service in Denver. And that's why I knew there were just 5 of us, because we got that little scholarship. She'd gather us together every now and then, check on us, and she's an amazing woman. So, but drinking. In high school, I wasn't resourceful enough to get a lot of money to drink. But in college, it was everywhere. And so, boy, that was like, ooh, wow, magic for me. Because I still carried that negative self-image and shame a bit about being Indian in that world. But fortunately, I got acquainted with some great people there who accepted me. They even knew I had been on welfare in high school. I didn't have parents, but they accepted me. But the drinking that was everywhere, Jesus, was like Animal House, right? The movie. So that I just got right into it, and I probably became dependent on alcohol, addicted probably really early. Well, that overlapped with another drinking era, which was lifeguarding and surfing on the Oregon coast. I talk about how I just kind of fall into that. So those 3 years, lifeguarding and ocean, the parties of that, drinking again. And in both of those first 2 years, I'm really sure no one knew my dependence on alcohol, because so many people were doing it. I don't think anyone really knew what a problem that was for me. Mm. Then again, overlapping a bit with the lifeguarding was the Marine Corps. So it was the draft was real big in Vietnam in the early 60s. And, I'm a political science major. I fell into that. I'm glad I did, because study of government, and all the history that happened to us as Indian people. That war, I didn't want to be killing a bunch of black people or brown people. I didn't want to be over there killing more brown people. But the draft, you couldn't get out of it if you were at least healthy anyway. And if you weren't rich like Donald Trump or one of these guys that could, fake their way out of it. So brown and black people, we were cannon fodder for the military industrial complex. Now, World War II, I've heard described as the good war. And, especially with us Indian people, we weren't just, killing a bunch of, we were being asked to kill a bunch of brown people. Mm-hmm. And we were, it really was a true national threat to us, to our country, both, from Germany, from Japan, 2 different, we got theaters of war that we were engaged with. And our Indian men, we were all over the place. And even some really strong Indian women joined the military at that time. But anyway, so there was an overlap in those 2 drinking areas, college, the 3 now. College, that lifeguard era, and then the Marines. And of course, the Marines or any military service, there's drinking a lot, but particularly the Marines, is glorified. With that macho stuff, the Marine Corps is something else. Like any of us veterans, we have a love-hate relationship with the Corps. That's for darn sure. I mean, they beat the hell out of us in boot camp, and physically and emotionally. And so the good part of that for me was surviving the darn thing. I had the draft, so I got a reserve unit, and thank goodness my reserve unit wasn't activated. I would have gone to Vietnam, sure, just like so many Indian guys. I would have gone if I was ordered to go. I was on standby, my unit for a 24-hour standby. for Vietnam, and we didn't get called up. In some ways, oh geez, I missed that action. On the other hand, it's like, man, I didn't want to be shooting some brown people or getting shot at myself, you know. And so those are the three drinking eras, the first three. Then Indian rodeo again overlapped with that. So again, drinking and rodeo. Now, you know, nowadays a lot more of the rodeo guys, you know, are discovering they don't need that. But at the time, I was strong enough not to drink. And geez, I only know one guy, Yakima, just a good all-around cowboy, who didn't drink. I think he quit in 1976 or 78. And the guy today, he's 82, I believe, is incredible. Never seen a guy that healthy. Anyway, he'd been sober since a cowboy. And,
Well,
really,
and you know, John, just what you're describing, like that relationship with the horse, you know, that cultural bonding with the horse, you know, you see it in Indian relay today. You see it with our people trying to have Crow Fair and trying to have Indian days in Montana. You know, you see that our love for the horse. And so you wanted to share with us a little bit about the healing that you do with the horse and why the horse is so important for Indians and what it helps with?
all right, yeah, good. I'm glad you brought that up. Boy, I just think that in our DNA, it's not particularly for what we call the horse nations, tribes like ours that, you know, had this relationship with a horse. So rodeoing and ranching, you know, like we're ranching on reservations in the West, particularly, that became a big thing for us for our sustenance. So a lot of my relatives, ranchers, farmers, the relationship with the land, and there's horses. Well, a lot of us turn to rodeo as they just, you know, for fun. That's an expression, you know, or didn't let the part of our competitive nature come out, even though a lot of us are introverts like me. But with that, you know, Indian basketball, res ball, and rodeo, you know, you could let out that, you know, that wildness, you know, that craziness a bit. So rodeo, my stepdad, I worked with him in racetrack for 2 years, in mostly around the Northwest. And so I didn't actually grow up with horses. I mentioned in there, like a lot of my friends and relatives who had parents. If you had a dad or an older brother, for example, that rodeoed, it was a natural thing. But I didn't have that because we didn't have our own place. You know, we camped out with other people. We were a particular family that didn't have our own place. So I only got to ride a little bit, you know, I didn't have a horse of my own. So I got more acquainted with horses, of course, through working at a racetrack and then in Indian rodeo. But even then, I didn't have the relationship, that natural relationship. You know, like horses in the rodeo were, you know, we used them for competition. The tougher they are, the better they were. So anyway, I had a great time there. And I always, particularly with wild horses, with untamed, or what one of my beautiful gurus, John Eagle Sr. in Fort Yates, North Dakota, Standing Rock. He, of all the Indian trainers, horsemen, he's the #1 guy that I recommend to others to get a program started, a healing program, because he knows all about the formal part. It's called EAP, Equine Assisted Psychotherapy, the EAP certification. But that and other formal certifications for horsemanship or horse therapy, they don't have the spiritual part. John has that. So he teaches the old way that we used to do things, which was relationship with the horse. I mean, you just look at it, it's so simple. We didn't have fences. So how are we going to keep our horses around? How are we going to even contact them? We had to ground them up and develop, that relationship through patience and trust. The white cowboy way that came in of, tying down a horse, tying a horse to a snubbing post and flagging them out, you're going to darn near break their neck. There's none of that in what's called natural horsemanship or gentle. And that's, for example, what a guy like John Eagle does, or John Eagle, excuse me. And then also Monty Roberts, who's actually part Indian in his background. But Monty Roberts in the early 90s coined that term, gentling and joining up. When you join up with the horse voluntarily comes to you without a rope or a fence or anything. But you develop that with what John Eagle calls an untouched horse. He prefers that over a wild horse. He's just a horse that hasn't been touched by a human yet. So you develop that, and I tell you, that's one of the greatest feelings in the world, when a horse who doesn't know you yet, or hasn't been what's called a broken horse, has been, or trained, when you finally get that relationship with a horse, where the horse lets you touch them for the first time, and then join up, that horse follows you without a lead rope or anything. That's the most amazing feeling in the world. And so you talk about healing, that's incredible. A horse isn't going to do that if you're drunk, if you're abusing them, if you're treating them roughly like you would treat another person. Horse doesn't want to be around you. So horse therapy, equine therapy that's developed in recent years as a profession, that's a natural thing, I think, for Indian people. Because I think we had it in the old days, just like John Eagle demonstrates. He walked into a herd of wild horses. He showed us that when my first training I went there, I've been there twice. And in 45 minutes, he picked out a 2-year-old stallion from that herd and had that horse just following him, didn't want to leave him. Now that's, native horsemanship. And those of us in the training watching that, or if you're being exposed to that training that he does, it's like, that's the most healing thing. Talk therapy, I'm all for it. Counseling, group counseling, things like that. But if you can combine that with horse therapy, I'm just like, I think that's, and I just lucked into that. Actually, it's kind of, I mentioned in the book, it's kind of crazy, but I dreamt about horses again after I'd been away from rodeo for about 20 years. I dreamt about a horse, and I'll be darned if the horse I have now, I've had this horse for 10 years now, Coda, which is friend in Dakota. He was already named that. He was an untamed horse at my age. So I'm going to be 80 next month, you guys. So at 70, a friend of mine who I work with, she's a Cow Creek tribal member, a beautiful woman. She gave me that horse. The owner couldn't take care of it. It had too many horses to take care of. And said, John, what do you think about? Oh, she was really, people who know horses are pretty good around people. She goes, oh, John, why don't you take a look at this horse? I'm going at my age, take on another project like, this. So this horse was barely halter break, they call it. She's barely halter broke. He brings them out arena, and God dang, that Amber knew better, it was love at first sight. This horse's temperament is really something. So he's never bucked, he's never bit anybody, he's never kicked anyone. And we've used him at Jillene's big wellness warrior camp for years. Over 100 kids the first time, and the second time, Jillene had 300 kids. This is what white people never understand. You work with Indians, nothing prepares you for working with Indians unless you know other Indians. I mean, here, a session never starts on time. You never know who you got, how many people you got. And this last time we did it, 2019, before COVID wrecked everything. So Jillene calls me the night before. It was a 2-day training. We had 5 horses there, Amber, Jones, and me, and 3 other people. So the night before, he said, John, one of the sessions didn't get a chance to come in because, our horses got tired the first. You can just tell when they're tired, So the last session, we just say, I'm sorry, guys, but horses are tired. We got to, take a moment to rest. Well, they want to come to the session. So I said, well, okay, sure, So Amber and I were waiting up there for the next day. And up the road comes these kids. And there's more and more and more. We had 71 kids in the session with horses. And Amber and I and these other instructors were like, oh, yeah, here we go. You know why that worked? It was one of the best sessions ever. You know why that worked? We had 3 elders in there in that circle. We started with a big circle every time. We start with a circle. And the ideal one is like 20 or 30 kids, maybe, that Jillene used to have us at for these tribal foster kids workshops. Anyway, so we had 3 elders there. We had Art McConville from Me Matilda, who's another crazy old Marine. We had Charlie Tailfeathers, who's, the elder, just an amazing guy with Jillian's crew. And we had this guy from New Zealand, they call Papa.
Yeah.
The Māori. So they just naturally spread out among this big circle of kids. And since they were there, we all start with a prayer. And then we always talk about how the horse's behavior, how to be safe. And then we go ahead and just do the whole thing. A holistic approach to horsemanship, which is therapeutic. So I asked Art McConville to say a prayer, and he did a prayer song. And we got like 71 kids, and they're as respectful and quiet as any group we've ever had. There's 71 of them. And I'm just I'm going with the flow, like, wow, this is incredible. And our horses were great. Our horses behaved. And my horse, Coda, he's never been around that many kids in a therapy session. And he had like a dozen kids around him, and he darn near went to sleep. He was not relaxed. So, man, the healing presence of horses, it's just amazing. And I've seen great things happen with kids, even from just a short session. And any kind of kids, a kid who was belligerent. A lot of kids are mandatory juvenile court referrals. Some kids are ADD. That's another thing. In our sessions, like with Amber Jones and also Mona Cochran, who's Warm Springs, was married to my cousin Billy Cochran. She's the other one who's EAP certified, equine assisted psychotherapy. Amber Jones and her, I think, are the only 2 Indian folks here in Oregon that are certified with that formal certification. So whenever we get referrals, we don't want to know the diagnosis of a kid. When they come to our sessions, they're just another human being. And tell you what, the horses do the therapy. Every one of these kids that gets has some kind of diagnosis as an at-risk kid or high-risk kid or ADD or some psychological diagnosis. It all works out. The horses are too big, first of all, right? The horses, if they don't know a horse, it's going to intimidate them, number one, although we never use that word. And a lot of kids, it's natural to be frightened. You've never been around a horse, or a horse kicked you or something, or bucked you off. That's a natural, that's a fear. And we love it in our opening sessions. We do that circle with a prayer. We just ask a kid their expectations, what are their expectations, after they introduce themselves. And a lot of kids will say they're afraid, or an adult even will say and we love to hear that, because 100% of the time, they're going to feel better. Or I mentioned Art McConville, and him and I just made a quick trip to Flathead, Missoula last week. And Art was saying, telling his daughter, there. She was asking, why does that work? And he used the example of his granddaughter came to Jillene's, she was in Jillene's camp. And because Art was joining me that day, just spur of the moment, I called him the night before and he said, oh, come on over. So she didn't want anything to do with the horses. But because Art was there, she followed Art. And she told him that, I'm not going to get on a horse. I'm not going to do it. Before long, she's grooming a horse and she's riding a horse. One of the first ones to start riding a horse that day. And I've heard that over and over. Some kid or some adult, and I just want to see the horse. I just want to pet the horse or something. And before long, you know, on their own, because we never push them, they're on top of a horse. And back then, there's a guy from South Dakota, Don Pigsley, worked at Chihuahua for years, Chihuahua Indian School. I like what he says too. He says, tell me, is John says, horses are just like Indians. And you know, you can't push an Indian. You can't push a horse. You know, you got to develop that relationship, the trust. So that's what's so healing. You're going to develop. Just good things are going to happen from both sides. Like, you know, my little horse, I couldn't believe, you know, heck, he likes it. He likes to be around these kids. And it's healing for them. So I wish that every reservation would do that. God, you could do it. Especially out west. You got horses all over the place. You got lots of land. And you got good horse people in every reservation. So it's good. It could be a really healing thing, especially you combine that with some good counseling or talk therapy. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, John. We're coming to the end of our time already. That went by so fast. I just wanted to, so the book Crazy Wolf can be ordered on Amazon. We already had a comment on here. Someone ordered the book already. So that's awesome. We're doing this community health worker training and we have 30 some participants in there and they all got a copy of John's book. So that's awesome. Yeah, we're going to be purchasing some more for like just door prizes and things like that. So you can order the book Crazy Wolf, A Half-Breed Story by John Spence. It's on Amazon. John, any final comments or words of encouragement to our viewers today before we end our power hour?
First, I want to thank you guys. Jillene, you know, you're a lot younger than me, but you're a hero to me too. Theda, wow. What can I say? So, you folks, I can't say enough good things about you and what you're doing with this healing work, you know. And for anybody who tunes in, you know, or goes to Native Wellness Training Institutes, boy, you're in for a good show. You're in for a great experience. And you've got a really great young crew that's growing up in this work. What is it? How do you call it? The Native Wellness
Indigenous 20-something project.
Jillene and Jordan and Josh and all those guys. This is fantastic. So heck, I've always been optimistic, and even more so these days. Came from my grandma, came from my grandmother. So thankfully, all these old Indian fellows who survived, men and women, gosh, we got great traditions and we got great strength and incredible potential out there. Okay, so just thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, John. I think, you know, it's about hope. Like that, to me, like that's what this book represents, right? Is hope. So thank you for sharing your story and thank you for sharing your hope. And I got a text about your eye. So John is fine. He's not trying to be a pirate in his next chapter. He's healing from a blood vessel thing.
I was just thinking, Jillene, it would be so cool, you know, because like, you know, Father's Day is coming up. And, you know, all of you who have young fathers, older fathers. That book is about fathers.
Oh, right. Mhm.
Book is about father healing too. Is maybe that would be just a good to get it for all the men in your family. Get a book, because I thought, John, you have a way of getting across to Indian men, because like Indian men can get across to Indian men. It's just, Father's Day coming up, and it's a good time for Native Wellness Institute. It's a good time for us to all heal, and we really respect you. We really like you coming on the Native Wellness Institute Power Hour, just to show that it can be done. Our Indian men are healing, and brought tears to my eye. I was just enjoying listening. I was, and we'll look back over this. So maybe if you were, John, if we were going to give advice to your younger self, if you were just like, if you could talk to your younger self, what would be some gems or some threads of advice you would give yourself?
I would say listen to your intuition, to what you know in your heart that you're hiding because of, hiding behind alcohol, one, but you're hiding because of talk to another person. I could never do anything, have done anything without help from other people. And again, this false American ethos, individuality, we did it myself. Whoever did it themselves? I mean, we have to have, even connections. We have to make healthy connections. You Indian guys do that, make those healthy connections, relationships. That's it.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you both so much. Remember Crazy Wolf. It's on Amazon. I think that's a great idea, Theda, about using it for Father's Day presents. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. This is the end of our week 60 of our Power Hours. And next week we begin week number 61. We're not sure how long we're going to keep doing this, but we keep rolling along. So thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you on Monday. Take care.
It's a cockle, ma'am. Love you all.